Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Channa Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajachandranjana Yashodanandana Rajachandranjana Jamunachira Yamuna Tiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chana Vallabha Vardhari Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Rajachandranjana Yashodanandana Rajachandranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stoltar Satashishi Man's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Iskcon Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koda Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhana Ki Vrindavan Dham Ki Mayapur Dham Ki Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jamuna Maya Ki Ganga Maya Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Yogi Ki Brihat Madanga Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Iskcon Ireland Ki Govinda Dham Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. So good morning and welcome to Tuesday morning's class of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're continuing on with the passing away of Bhishma Dev, and so now we'll just say the prayers to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse number 15. Yatra dharma suto raja gadapane vrikodara krishnostri gandivam chapam suhrit krishnastato vipat. Yatra dharma suto raja gadapane vrikodara krishnostri gandavam chapam suhrit krishnastato vipat. Yatra dhamma sato raja gadapane vrikodara krishnostri gandivam chapam sukrit krishnastato vipat. And translation and purport word for word. Yatra, where there is Dharma Sutta, the son of Dharmaraj, Raja, the king, Gadapani, with his mighty club in hand, Vrikodar, Bhima, Krishna, Arjuna, Astri, carrier of the weapon, Gandivam, Gandiva, Chapam, bow, Surit, well-wisher, Krishna, Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, Tata, thereof, Vipat, reverse. Translation. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses in the presence of King Yudhishthir, the son of the demigod controlling religion? Bhima, the great fighter with a club, and the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. Purport. As far as the material or spiritual resources were acquired, there was no scarcity in the case of the Pandavas. Materially, they were well equipped because two great warriors, namely Bhima and Arjuna, were there. spiritually, the king himself was the symbol of religion. And above all of them, the personality of God, Lord Sri Krishna, was personally concerned with their affairs and the well-wisher. And yet, there were so many reverses on the side of the Pandavas. Despite the power of pious acts, the power of personalities, the power of expert management, and the power of weapons, under the direct supervision of Lord Krishna, the Pandavas suffered so many practical reverses, which can only be explained as due to the influence of Kala, inevitable time. Kala is identical with the Lord himself, and therefore the influence of Kala indicates the inexplicable wish of the Lord himself. There is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. Amigana timarandasya jana jana shalakaya chakshuran malitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapatam yena bhutale Swayam Rupagada Mayam Dadati Svak Vadantikam Namo Vishnu Badai Krishna Vishai Vatane Shiman Sanfutas Guru Swami Nityanam Shri Vadai Krishna Swami Shri Bhari Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanam Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurivani Pacharani Nirvashesha Sandivadi Pastyata Dejatarani. These actual two verses, 14 and 15, are very much linked together because they're all explaining about the nature of time. Time, it's said, is a forceful representative of the Lord. Time keeps on going. Time and tide wait for no man. So time is constantly working when one is in the material world. The inconceivable action of time, that's the way it's described. The inconceivable action of time. Sometimes we are trying to control things. I mean, it's kind of laughable how we try to control things. I mean, that is the nature of the living entity. You try to control everything, but you know, how much can that little control affect? Like, there's billions of planets that have been going on for billions of years interminably, and one is trying to control something. You know, we should be able to get a better perspective of how time actually works. Recently, I was listening to a discussion between there was a discussion between a logician and one of our devotees, and the logician was a particularly harsh character and was insulting to our devotees when they were talking, and the thing that came out of it was that the guy really thought he knew what was what, do you know? And the guy actually, I'm finding sort of difficult. Excuse me, Haribol, could you stay quiet? Sorry, it's a little difficult to concentrate when there's people talking loudly in the background. So the person was trying to present themselves as if they knew everything. They were so logical that they had the answers for everything. It was laughable. It was absolutely laughable, and the person was kind of very aggressively knowledgeable, and the devotee was trying to bring them back to just a decent way of thinking and talking and expressing and communicating. But that's the way the living entity gets. The living entity in the material world is constantly. We notice in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 3 divisions of time, where the demon thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I'll get more according to my means. He is my enemy, and I will kill him. So that the living entity is so absolutely caught up in this kind of mentality that it is very difficult to shake the living entity from that scale of things. And it's not that just because one is a powerful living entity that one is like that, but it's said that every pauper is proud of his penny. So even if a person isn't very materially important, still they think that they are in control. There's a famous it was a story. It was actually in history. Ravindra Swarup would give this example of the person who's in the library, who has the keys of the library, and because he had that key, he actually tried to keep everybody under control. He felt that he was really in control of everything. I've worked in an office one time in an insurance company, and again, everybody who has their little section would be fiercely guarding that little section as though it was their life and soul depended on it, And in order to get some favour for them, you had to talk nicely to them and you had to behave nicely, and then they would give you what they wanted. So this is the difficulty of trying to control, but that's the living entity in this vastly uncontrollable scenario. The living entity is trying to exert their influence. The reason I'm bringing that up is because in order for us to get some understanding of what's going on here, in order for me to get better understanding of what's going on, I'm trying to see the significance of what has just happened here. It was the Kurukshetra war has just finished. 640 million or 64 million, I'm not sure. People died. It was quite a lot of people, and it was all between two families feuding. You could say 105 on one side and 5 on the other side. So it was a very small amount of people. So when everything else was finished, it was only these 5 people who were left. So it was obvious that they would think, what have I done? What has happened? And to take responsibility, especially if one was Yudhishthira, who was a king, and understood that the actual war was fought because of him. So he's trying to get some perspective of time, and this is why this story is in the Bhagavatam, is so as to get for us to understand who Krishna is and how Krishna acts. Kalosmi, time I am, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, and that's another example of you could say the horrific nature of the material world, because Arjuna wants to see Krishna in this form, and then suddenly he sees Krishna in this form, and suddenly he becomes totally afraid, because he sees all the living entities going into being crushed in the jaws of the universal form. So that is quite a horrific scene, and so we get some understanding of how powerful time is, and how the living entity is trying to work. Therefore, in this particular scenario, we're seeing that Yudhishthira is trying to get some grasp on that, and Bhishma is going to explain to him, and it's even more pronounced because Bhima is there, Arjuna is there, Yudhishthira himself is there, and Krishna is there. So why were there so many reverses? That is the question that is asked here. Why was there so many reverses when these great personalities were there? And then we get some other understanding, especially also from the previous verse. How even the most pious has to suffer the condition of material nature. That's what Krishna's point he's trying to get across here. Even the most pious has to suffer the condition of material nature. So if we actually take that in, we start to understand where we are in relation to eternal time. And we might think that our particular set of circumstances are extremely important, so that we go around and we tell everybody about what we're going through and about our life. But it's not that important, actually. To a degree it is important, but in another perspective it's not important, because time is exerting its influence on everything and everybody, and there is nothing that we can do about it. There is nothing that we can do about it. Well, there is something that we can do about it, in the sense that there are 3 different things. We can understand the Lord, we can follow the injunctions of the Lord, we can follow the injunctions of the Brahmanas, and we can follow the injunctions of religious principles. These are the 3 things how we can act. despite the absolutely devastating effect of time. The image, of course, comes to me of, I think it's 2006 it was, when the tsunamis were coming, and there was pictures taken. It was someone that was on a balcony on the third floor, looking at the wave coming in, and suddenly it was sweeping everything in its power. Absolutely, there was people were flowing in rivers, and there was cars, and everything was being washed ashore by the power of this wave. So our little lives are actually a little bit like that as well, being washed aside and being brought, this is swept away by the power of time, and so this is what is important. This is one aspect of something which we should consider, so that we can get some grasp of what's actually happening in our lives, so that we don't get so caught up or head up about any particular one little thing that is happening in our lives. We understand there is importance. We have to act properly, and it is important how we act. We consider in a society or in a community. One of the things that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj used to say, we should act as though our community, the welfare of community, depends completely on how we are acting with that one person. So that's how much energy we should put into our daily lives and our daily activities, and how we perform and how we behave. But on another level, we should not take it all so seriously, because it is one small thing which is happening in the face of eternity. So there's those paradoxes that are there, in the life of the devotee, and that he has to be able to discern or to discriminate what is important at one point, what is not important, what is binding and what is liberating. These are the activities in which a devotee has to learn how to act, despite all these different things going on. So here we have in this particular situation that Bhishma is describing to Yudhishthira how to act in this particular situation. He's explaining to him that he's not responsible, that there are other factors that are involved, and that it is in fact important that we should just serve Krishna despite whatever things which are happening in our life, and that will give us peace, and that will give us clarity on how to act. In the 18th chapter, this is very clearly brought up, 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when it explains, let's take verses 30, 31 and 32. O son of Pritha, that understanding by which knows what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, what is to be heard, what is to be feared, and what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating, is in the mode of goodness. So that is giving us some idea on how we should act, and what circumstances and what principles we should use in which to act. We should try to act in the mode of goodness, but not only in the mode of goodness, but the mode beyond the mode of goodness, which is Shuddha-sattva. But we should try to bring ourselves up to the mode of goodness. And we're all somewhat going between the modes at different times, even different times of the day. But ultimately our position is that we're servants of Krishna. And that is what we're trying to get through here, is that Krishna is in control and we're servants of Krishna. We should act according to the principles of religion, according to the instructions of the Brahmanas, and according to the instructions of the Lord. But the result we should leave to Krishna, because Krishna is the supreme proprietor, the supreme knower, and the supreme controller. We should act dispassionately. Karmane Vanikarishte, it's 247 Bhagavad Gita. Actually, I'll read it. 247. It's an important verse that we understand that Krishna is in control. And this is what Krishna is telling to Arjuna. Karmane Vanikarishte ma phaleshu kadachana ma tu karma phala heturvur ma tu sangus stu at karmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty. That's what we're saying. You've a duty according to the scripture and according to Krishna's understanding. But you are not entitled to the fruits of the action. So these things are going on beside as Krishna is in control, and it is Krishna's will, which is the supreme will. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, So this is for Yudhishthira to understand that. It's for us to understand. And never be attached to not doing your duty. So we shouldn't be in the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion. So the mode of passion, Sunaprita, that understanding which cannot distinguish between religion and irreligion, between action that should be done and action that should not be done, is in the mode of passion. And in the mode of ignorance, that understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion, under the spell of illusion and darkness, and strives always in the wrong direction, Uparte, is in the mode of ignorance. So we should try to aspire to act in the mode of goodness, but then we should aspire to act as service to Krishna. That is the way in which we should act. And a great verse, a great sentence that was spoken by Krishna in the previous verse is that one should not grudge being controlled by time. What a way Prabhupada has put it. We should not grudge it. You know, what is the most famous question that we ever get? Think about it for a second. What's the most famous question that the materialist puts to the devotee? And it's the one which stumps the devotee, or seemingly it's the stumping one from the materialist. Can you think about what it is for a second? If Krishna is so good, why is there evil in the world? Why does God allow this to happen? Why does God allow all this evil to happen?
Why do bad things happen to good people?
Why do bad things happen to good people? So here Prabhupada is saying, listen, don't grudge it. Don't grudge what happens. It's going to happen anyway. It's not your business. This is the world. You have to deal with it. You know, suck it up. This is what Prabhupada is saying to us. We cannot do anything about it. This is the way the world is. You know, there's a reason for it. Krishna's in control. This is Kala. This is time. So time is achieving so many things. All that we can do is to perform our duty. We can serve Krishna. We can serve the devotees, and we can act within the religious principles. So on a larger scale, Bhishma is going to say this to Yudhishthira as well, and he's even he's pronouncing the magnitude of the situation by saying that even with Arjuna there, even with Bhishma there, even with Krishna there, even with you there, Yudhishthira, the son of the god of religion. So, and I think Prabhupada really puts this really, really nicely. It makes me. I've done an amount of management in Iskcon, and I've been, criticized for it, or many different occasions. But Prabhupada, I can always quote this verse. I can always say, I'm a bad manager. So what? Like, I mean, what can I say? Like, look at here. Even when Krishna was there, when Yudhishthira was there, when Bhishma was there, when Arjuna was there were so many reverses. So why are you getting on my case? Anyway, I felt that was a little bit of a reprieve, because everything is perfectly happening. You could say. I'm not saying this as a way to neglect duty. No, we should act according to principles. And in fact, that if you look at it, Prabhupada says, Chatur Varna Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Krishna's acting through the four Varnas and Ashrams. So therefore you should perform your duty properly. So it's no excuse not to perform properly. In fact, if you perform properly, you're pleasing Krishna. Excuse me. If you're doing it with that mentality. So we have to understand then, why are all these reverses going on in the world? And Prabhupada at the end of this is a beautiful way in which he puts it. He says, it's the inexplicable wish of the Lord Himself. The inexplicable wish of the Lord Himself. We have some understanding what the Lord wanted to achieve here. He wanted to remove the whole family of Duryodhana and all his brothers and so on. That's what Krishna wanted to do. He wanted to remove that family because they were creating havoc. So in that instance we can understand clearly, what Krishna was doing. But sometimes it might not be as clear, or even at the time we may not know what's happening. But we can understand that it is Krishna, that Krishna is acting. And Krishna has many different tools at his disposal to act. But time is one, in this material world, time is probably the biggest one, because it puts everybody in their place, because everyone knows they only have a specific period of time in which to live. Death is sure, death is certain for every living entity here. So you can't get really too carried away, or you shouldn't get too carried away. And you should have that understanding then that Krishna is way, 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 way above us, and it should give us a sense of humility. But the fact that is the living entity, his soul is eternal, and actually can contact the eternal, who is Krishna. That is really why time is there in the first place. It is to give us that understanding of who Krishna is, and the understanding that this is the place where the convicts go. So in a convict situation, you can't expect things to work out really well. I mean, I've often watched, I'm actually quite fascinated sometimes by looking at these programs about the jails. I don't know whether it's a fear of going in there, or it's trying to drill into my head, don't go to jail, don't go to jail. It's quite funny. But you hear about them, you hear about it, some of these programs of these penitentiaries, like the US is the worst, is the most incarcerated place on the planet apparently. There's more people in jail in America per capita than any other place on the planet. I remember being in New Jersey one time, and I saw this huge incarceration premises. It's a pretty scary place. I mean, actually recently I was also in Joy, I was visiting a devotee in there one time, and the doors close behind you, boom, 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 one after the others. You go through different levels until you get into the place where the prisons are. So, this penitentiary, they're pretty horrific places, and sometimes there's these programs I watched in some of the US jails, the high risk ones, and there's all gangs in these places. It's not just, you're in jail, okay, but when you're in jail, there's all these horrific characters around. There's who bash up people, like who, if you're not in a gang, you're in trouble, and apparently, people when they go there, there's one movie I watched that, when people come in, they you see what point, everyone's waiting to see what point they'll break, they're in for the first the day or so. Some people just, the minute they see what's happening, their liberty is gone, they're in with all these horrific people, and then they just completely break down, they shatter, their whole demeanour is gone, they realise that they're here in this horrific situation. And it's not even that the jailers are the worst. They're probably, I'm not going to make any comment about them, that they're bad, but the actual people in the prison are the worst, because they're the worst of the worst, inverted commas. And so they when they go in, they get beaten up, they get raped, they get so many things. The people playing on their head. You have psychos playing on your head. Like, come on. I mean, what do you want? So that's in this world. That's where we put people. So the material world is full of these kind of people as well. It's full of these are the conditions of the material world. We see how we act when people act out of place. We put them in these prisons. So Krishna's, this material world is like that as well. So so I'm just trying to give some perspective to what this place is like. So don't be surprised that there are some things happening. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is there, if Krishna's all good, why is there evil in the world? It's because the living entity has that nature, has that rebellious nature, has left has left the actual protection of Krishna, and so by going that you're turning your back on Krishna, and you're opening up this horrific scenario. And in that scenario, you try to pretend that you're Krishna, and you inflict this your psychosis on other living entities. So this is the. So anybody would prefer to stay in the mode of goodness and try to practice religious principles and take Krishna as your supreme. Yeah, it's the only way. So that is not meant to. This horrific situation is not meant to make you into even a more, horrific person. No, it's meant to invoke the compassion, and that's what Krishna is about. It's about the compassion to try to help people come back and to bring them back into this material world, out to the spiritual world. When I went to the incarceration place and I was visiting the person, there was a particular chaplain there, and I think he was Catholic, and he was particularly sympathetic to this prisoner who was a devotee. And the devotee had been treated harshly, probably because he hadn't the language barrier, but also because people couldn't relate to what it was he was doing. And he committed a crime, but it wasn't, the crime was pretty innocuous crime, but because it had to do with drugs, it looked much better, much greater than what it was. He was actually doing something to without getting into the details of it. He was trying to grow marijuana plants to see could it remove the THC from marijuana. It was a crazy scheme. It was a crazy scheme, but some devotees can get into these things, and he was given 7 years in prison. It was absolutely incredible. Most people couldn't believe it, but this priest had he felt actually very compassionate. So he reached out. Who is it? Because the devotee, when he was in prison, he was a very good person. He was drawing these pictures of Krishna, and he was always quoting scripture and so on. So it's a devotee. So he basically reached out, and eventually I got to see him. So the compassion of the priest got other people in to try to help the guy. So now his sentence is nearing an end, and hopefully he'll be out soon. So this compassion is there, and the compassion is actual knowledge of what this material world is about. And so the devotees should actually be teaching this to humanity at large. That is what Prabhupada has set up. He set up this whole Krishna consciousness movement so that as devotees we can help the society at large escape from the absolute difficulties of the material world, shall we say. And it has particularly been felt at the moment with the pandemic, because people are afraid. When there was the threat of going into level 5, which means everything shut down again, you had so many business people, literally hundreds of thousands in Ireland anyway, who felt that their livelihoods were completely going to be threatened, and their business, which they had spent maybe years developing, was going to be finished. And so there was a huge fear about that. There's the huge fear of contracting the disease. There's the fear going on that, we're going to be taken over by these malevolent forces who are going to inject us with different little things, which 5G is going to control us, and there's all these fears going on. But this is time. This is Kala. This is the inexplicable wish of the Lord Himself. I've talked to so many, some very advanced devotees, and they're just saying it doesn't matter what it is. If it's somebody in control, if it's a computer in Wuhan, or if it's some plot, what's going. This is time. This is what we're undergoing, understanding that this is all happening by Krishna's arrangement, and we should be taking shelter of Krishna of these things, not taking shelter of what conspiracy theory is going on. I mean, okay, you should have some knowledge of whatever, you shouldn't be foolish or whatever, but don't spend your time. The reason is because of time. This is the material world in which we're living. So as a devotee, our duty is to actually to to spread out the Dharma of Krishna consciousness. But not only that, but actually we should be explaining our lifestyle. We have a charmed lifestyle. As difficult as it may seem at times, it is a charmed lifestyle. We actually know what is going on. We have an understanding what are the vicissitudes of the material world. We understand why they're there. We understand that we're eternal living entities and that our position is to go back to the spiritual world. We understand that we don't have to get stuck into some right-wing politics or get stuck into some left-wing politics to try to rectify the situation in the world. We don't have to do that. We can see in the US how the whole place, well, judging from the news clips that I get anyway, people are going one against the other. Hell for leather against the other, trying to... We saw it on the streets of Dublin last week. In Dublin last week there were two groups. One, the demaskers, who were the right wing, who were Ireland, and the other guys who wanted to get rid of these numpties. And everybody has a great feeling to this a kind of more of a left wing policy. We get basically communist, whatever way you want to put it, socialist. I'm not knocking any of these systems. I'm just saying. And they went in and they started beating up the guys, beating up the other guys. And the press were trying to take photographs of the left-wing guys, who were supposed to be the good guys, beating up the right guys. And they were trying to get away from us, when they knocking the cameras down. And this was going on in the background. We were chanting Hare Krishna, and they went behind. Most of the devotees didn't even know what was going on, and which is good. but the point is that we actually have an amazing system, and yet we're afraid to tell people about it. We're afraid we'll be laughed at by the left wing and the right wing. They think that the religion, oh God, no, we're not into religion anymore. Well, why not? Because you're numpties. That's why you're not into religion anymore. Because you have no idea what's going on. So we should actually start to develop the courage of our convictions, like we had previously, and start to tell people that Krishna consciousness it's a great process. Take it up. Don't forget your nonsense. Just give it up. Just forget all that stuff that's going on in your head, which is your speculation. Like in the 1820, Prabhupada says in the purport, he says that the knowledge that people have in the mode of passion is speculative. They're just imagining this is this or is that this solution, that solution. It's all mental speculation. And the knowledge in the mode of ignorance is just bodily knowledge. It's comfort. Can I have some comfort? I want this, I want this, I want to eat this, I want to eat that, I want to drive this car, I want to show off to this person. This is the mode of ignorance, bodily knowledge. Speculative knowledge is the mode of passion. But knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. So every living entity is the same as us. There's no difference. There's not a right wing or a left wing, or it's not a refugee and a white supremacist. It's not any of these things. And it's important that we should also live this. But it's not then that everybody is equal, and we have to have discrimination how to live the four Chaturvarna Maya Shishtam. We should be we should learn to discriminate positively. That takes intelligence. Prabhupada says that these things take intelligence. We should act in the Shuddha Sattva, beyond the mode of goodness. Whereas in the mode of goodness, Krishna is explaining to us how we should see Krishna everywhere. But then we should also each individual personally take up their personal service to Krishna, in cooperation with everybody else. We're working on all this together. We're out there to serve Krishna together. There should be nobody acting out of personal interest or, Prabhupada says the party spirit. They will destroy everything, he said. That was the way he put it. It was quite amazing. Prabhupada Prabhupada was dealing with so many different individuals, with so many different ideas, coming from so many different backgrounds, and yet he was still able to steer the whole Krishna consciousness movement into Shuddha Sattva, beyond the mode of goodness even. Vyavasyatmaka bhutiya ekaha kurunanda. Well, Beho Shaka Hyanantasta. Baho means many. There are many paths. That those who are irresolute, there is many branch. Their intelligence is many branch. So this is the same thing. That knowledge by which one sees that in many different bodies there are different types of living entities, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. So not only you're a right wing, left wing, you're a refugee, you're a traveller, you're a this. No, but you're a plant, you're an animal, you're an insect, this is the problem with the mode of passion, because you're trying to exploit, the demonic tendency comes in. So we should be constantly trying to bring ourselves to the mode of goodness as much as we can. And then when we get to the mode of goodness, we have to act in Krishna consciousness. In other words, is part of a cooperative team to please Krishna and to please the spiritual master. So anyway, so these are the lessons of time. They're powerful. I didn't get on to another aspect of which I wanted to speak on, which was the when and how and when to speak strongly for Krishna, because like somebody may have lost their child in the tsunami, and you just go, oh, it's just time, this happens, it's just happens, you've just got to just deal with it, You're not going to say that at that point to that person. But yet that knowledge is there. We have an example in the Bhagavatam of Maharaj Chitraketu. He wanted a son. He was told by Angira that his son would be Harsha Shoka, happiness and distress. He said, doesn't matter, I just want a son. I just want a son. He had millions of wives, millions literally. Anyway, but then he had the son, and then the son was poisoned by the other queens in the because they didn't have any issue, and so he was lamenting, unbelievable lamentation by the king. His son had been killed. So Angira came back, but this time he had Narada with him, and then he asked the son to take life again in the body, and then the son started to speak. And then all the court were there listening to this living entity speaking. And he said, who are these guys? The person that these people were lamenting for didn't even recognize them. And the truths there of families come together, they go apart. They're just like straws on the on the ocean. And actually even more so, the person he was lamenting for, it was said that this was his enemy in his previous life. And in order to inflict the greatest amount of pain on this person, he came as a son and then left. And so that was how the laws of karma work. So, we can see how these laws are there, but how and when to use these. And we had in a discussion last night, we were saying that when a person is Krishna conscious, Krishna also inspires from within when to speak these things. And then one can actually speak in a proper way, and we understand how Prabhupada is self-realized, so he would be able to cut through and actually get right to where people are at. And sometimes even Prabhupada, he would speak strongly and people would be put off or upset or whatever. But that was Prabhupada's strong speaking, and it was no matter what, we still have to speak. We have to testify this chopping technique the spiritual master he took from the spiritual master. We can see that it had to be done in certain circumstances. So so these are the lessons that are coming from the Bhagavatam. We get the real lesson. We see the lamentation of Chitraketu, but then we understand Krishna or Narada comes and says, perform devotional service, and then you will be you will be able to understand these things as they are. We see the situation of Yudhishthira. He was acting in Krishna consciousness, and yet he killed so many people, or it was the result of so many people dying. But then, and he felt so much guilt. But then, Bhishma explained to him, no, these are the inexplicable forces of time. Krishna was even on your side, and still you're feeling in this way, and you had so many reverses. So these are all the lessons that are coming from the Bhagavatam. So this is the mercy of the devotees. And as getting back, this lifestyle, we have to share this with people, because people cannot understand what is going on. They cannot understand, and they eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you'll be dying. There's no, they don't understand. They just think that they'll, they think they'll be okay. Okay, you just die, and that's it. So what can I do about it? And they've no knowledge, no understanding of what's happening. As I often mention this point when I was leaving the hospital, leaving one of our dear devotees who left. But as on my way out, because it was a kind of a terminal ward, and I heard somebody listening to Coronation Street on the I don't know, not everybody knows what Coronation Street, but it's a soap that's been going on for 50 or 60 years, and people used to tune into it religiously, But they've only a few weeks left to live, or their football team got beaten. This is the lamentation that the people are in this situation. They're clinging on to the stories of this world. They're clinging on to these stories, and they're not going to get any relief whatsoever. So the compassion about the devotee should be to share this Krishna consciousness and knowledge in a compassionate way, and to be able to help devotees make spiritual advancement. Okay, I'll stop there. Shrimad Bhagavatam Ki. Shani, will you turn off here?